Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Clinical Excellence, Optimizing Member and Provider Experience Through Digital Transformation. Before we get started, I'd like to review a few housekeeping details. Today's webinar is being recorded, and an online archive of today's event will be available a few days after the session. If you have trouble seeing the slides at any time during the presentation, please press F5 to refresh your screen on your PC or Command R if you're using a Mac. You may ask a question at any time during the presentation by typing your question into the Q&A box located on the right side of your screen and pressing Enter. And finally, I'd like to remind you of AHIP's antitrust statement located in the handout section at the bottom of your screen. We will, as always, comply with that statement. Among other things, the antitrust statement prohibits us from discussing competitively sensitive information. At this time, I'll turn it over to your moderator, Sue Willman. Ms. Willman, you may proceed.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome you all today to this exciting webinar where our select panel of experts from Tri-West Healthcare Alliance, Amelia, and EXL Health will discuss how healthcare payers and providers are reshaping and accelerating their digital strategies to deliver impacts across clinical operations and member and provider experience. I'd like to acknowledge and thank AHIP for sponsoring our webinar and for all of you in attendance for taking time out of your busy day to engage with this panel discussion. Today's agenda is dedicated to a panel session with our speakers. I'll take a few moments to introduce the panelists and then we'll dive right into the discussion. Feel free to post your question in the QA box as mentioned previously on the covered topics, and we'll spend time at the end with the panelists addressing your questions. So first, let me introduce myself. My name is Sue Willman, Senior Vice President and General Manager at EXL Health. I am responsible for the strategy, development, launch, and management of products within our clinical, pharmacy, and data and analytics service lines. I will act as moderator for today's panel session, and I'm excited to introduce our speakers. First is Joe Odo, Chief Information Officer at Tri-West Healthcare Alliance. Joe has 20+ years experience in healthcare IT leadership roles and joined Tri-West in 2019. Next is Ergan Ekagi, Vice President of Emerging Technologies at Amelia, an IP soft company. Ergan is responsible for architecting business solutions, leveraging autonomic arbitrage, and leading global application management services, along with development services. Additionally, we welcome Ankur Rai, Chief Digital Officer for EXL Services. As Chief Digital Officer, Ankur is responsible for deepening EXL's cloud, data, analytics, and AI capabilities, designing and deploying client digital solutions that deliver the trifecta impact of improved experience, outcomes, and efficiency. Rounding out our esteemed panelist is Sherry Walsh. Sherry is the Senior Vice President and Chief Nursing Officer for EXL Health. Sherry is responsible for guiding and shaping EXL Health's service delivery strategy, capabilities, and operational excellence. Welcome, panelists, and thank you for your participation. Now, a little bit about our panelists leading innovative organizations. Tri-West Healthcare Alliance was formed in 1996 as the only company of its kind with one sole purpose that continues today. That purpose is to serve the healthcare needs of the military and veteran communities, offering access to quality provider networks and excellent customer service through the Department of Veterans Community Care Network in Regions 4 and 5. Amelia, an IPsoft company, is the world's largest privately held AI software company and a leader in automation and conversational AI. Amelia creates fulfilling human experiences through groundbreaking AI solutions, enabling conversational experiences, streamlined IT operations, and automated processes. Lastly, EXL Health is part of EXL Service, a leading global operations management and analytics company that helps our clients build and grow sustainable businesses through orchestration of domain expertise, data and analytics, and digital technology. At EXL Health, we focus that domain expertise, data analytics, and digital technology through human ingenuity to transform how care is delivered, managed, and paid. So let's get to the meat of it and get into our topics. First, we'll talk about macro trends. We all know that digital disruption is growing and evolving at rapid speeds across all sectors of our economy, including but not limited to healthcare. Some interesting trends we are seeing in healthcare include 20.4 billion devices connected to the Internet of Things in 2020, a projected 1.8 billion in global RPA software revenue in 2021, and 50% of healthcare providers that will invest in robotic process automation over the next 3 years. I'd like to direct my first question to Joe. Joe, what are you seeing as emerging trends within the healthcare landscape related to automation and digital technologies?
Thanks, Sue. I'm going to put that in two different areas. We're seeing a lot of macro trends from a technology perspective that are impacting and combining with a lot of what you see in the healthcare industry and trends there. So some of the technologies that are really impacting us are 5G, which is 100 times faster than 4G. You're seeing IoT relative to device reliability and the plethora of devices that are coming in. You're seeing wearables and phones that are becoming more input-output devices and are impacting many healthcare applications via I/O. And then you're also seeing, like you mentioned, RPA, robotic process automation, and artificial intelligence, especially conversational AI, impacting healthcare. The healthcare trends that we're seeing that are really coming online, telehealth, which is probably the biggest one, and we've had a tipping point relative to what we're seeing. IoT and the medical devices that are becoming more reliable. And then you're seeing a couple other, I'll call them interoperability type standards like HL7 Fire that are helping bring workflow and massive amounts of data, clinical data, to the forefront. In addition, the standardization for some of the electronic health records. So those are exciting times and exciting trends.
Thank you, Joe. Turning our attention to outside of healthcare, Ergun, what digital and automation trends are you seeing in the industry right now?
Thank you, Sue. I will say across industries, and this is industry agnostic, in the last year, first and foremost, and unfortunately influenced by COVID, we're seeing a significant uptick in the pace of transformation organization. We're seeing multiple years of transformation happening in months, wherein previously organizations would go through pilots, try it out, try to build a competency capability. We've now identified we have critical gaps in our delivery that have to be delivered through technology. So we're seeing that. We're seeing a rapid pace of transformation. There's many examples that we can get into, and we'll dive that deep into it as we go. Beyond that, we're also seeing that technology-wise is critical, becoming critical to engage the customer on whatever channel best suits them. So instead of dictating, come to chat or come to my mobile app, what is the channel that best suits the customer, and be multi-channel, omni-channel engagement. Have a phone line that's tied to your mobile app, that's on WhatsApp, that's also on Google Home, and allow your customer community to engage you in whatever channel that works best across those layers. And then, candidly, the final layer, most importantly, we're finding is that AI needs to learn. Learning solutions that are able to develop intelligence over time as they observe are critical because the world keeps changing. So we can't build static digital solutions that stay stationary once we build them. We need solutions that evolve every day.
Very good. Thank you, Ergun. I think those are very relevant points, especially related to pace and omni-channel, definitely creating some interesting dynamics as we move forward. Ankor, do you have any additional insights that you would like to add?
Yeah, so when I think of trends, I like to follow the money. When you look at over $50 billion that have been invested by VCs and private equity over the last 5 years in digital health, over 2/3 is actually going into consumer-centric new solutions. So I think that's a macro trend that's here to stay, which is a lot of investment going to remove friction from the consumer experience. whether it be simple things like allowing them to schedule better, whether it be creating transparency in billing, or whether it be finding the correct provider or even through rating. So consumer centricity is a big macro trend. I'd like to add on to what Ergun said. I think it's not, the second trend is not just about AI, but it's almost AI as an operating system for the enterprise. And what that means is customers, just as 15 years back, if you didn't have a website, you were conceived as being backwards. Very quickly, customers are going to become attuned to expecting learning experiences. And when that happens, if you don't have AI at the back end, to some extent, it's going to be perceived as you don't care enough about the customer. So I feel those are two very big macro trends that are going to sort of ride on some of the things that Joe and Ergun talked about.
Great. Thank you so much, Encore. We'll move to our next topic, and that is related to member and provider experience and engagement. Effectively using digital solutions across the member and provider experience can deliver significant impacts to both satisfaction and engagement. And certainly we heard Encore mention that macro trend of consumer engagement. Just some macro trends that we're seeing. Ergun mentioned this related, or I think it was Joe, related to 7 out of 10 wearable companies increased their release of algorithms for early infectious disease detection, including COVID-19 and flu. So trying to get that information to the consumer sooner rather than later. In addition, we are seeing approximately 132 million people in the US who will use a digital voice assistant at least one time per month in 2021. So getting to Joe's comment about conversational IVR or conversational AI, which Ergun mentioned as well. And then lastly, 20% of patient interactions will involve some form of AI enablement within clinical or non-clinical processes by 2023, up from less than 4% today. So talking about how do we infuse digital into the operational workflow. For the first question, I would like to direct this to Joe. What kind of advancements are you seeing in digital solutions, and how are they impacting member and provider experience as well as engagement?
Thanks, Sue. So I think one of the macro trends I see that's also impacting healthcare from a member-provider experience is members and customers want everything to fit within their lives. They have preferences. They want to be able to customize the experience, how they are engaged, how they are enacted, how they engage for care. So we're seeing that even with telehealth, even over these COVID times. There's been a tipping point that a lot of the initial visits, at least, and subsequent are by telehealth. And the providers are moving in that direction to provide that type of services. We're also seeing the interaction with doctors and the overall care life cycle. We're seeing it all the way from the appointment scheduling preferences that are automated all the way through linkage to electronic health records with clinical data to kind of travel through and provide a rich enabled experience for the provider and the member. We're seeing it impact all kinds of areas, member satisfaction, the medical spend relative to some of these advancements in digital solutions. But I think the real key is fitting within the lives of the members and how the providers provide the care for that.
Very good, Joe. Thank you. Definitely looking at the personalization aspect there. Sherry, would you have any thoughts you'd like to add?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sue. So I think it's interesting that conversational AI has come up almost in every answer. It seems to be the trend that's happening, and it's because, as we all know, the healthcare industry is trying to, control the costs, and they're taking actually a page from the playbook of other industries, figuring out how to apply it. We have a lot of different use cases for payers and providers where you can take this highly advanced AI and apply it. And, we've seen it play out in claims intake and processing, member and provider servicing, enrollment type activities, of course, in population health management. even down into the provider space of appointment scheduling, benefits and eligibility verification, and so much more. And the beauty of conversational AI is you're able to get the solution into production within a short time frame and start to see that immediate or quick ROI and delivering value. What's really cool, Sue, you had asked the question, what are we seeing as benefits to the member and the provider? With this conversational AI perspective, what we're seeing is the 24/7 basically service anywhere, 24/7 at any time. And for the most part, they're able to get what they need, right away with that initial interaction. So what's fascinating is while you're deploying this technology, you're decreasing cost of operations, but you're also improving your customer satisfaction scores as well as your order score.
Great. Thanks, Sherry. I'm actually going to keep you on the hot seat if you don't mind, and talk a little bit more about, from an operational standpoint, what are some other examples where you're seeing digital-driven workflows tying back to impacts to member and provider satisfaction? You touched on that a little bit.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump from conversational AI, and I'm going to talk to how we're seeing digital being played out in different areas. I'm going to use two as an example. So one is utilization management, where we're starting to see digitally led solutions as an example, where you have your conversational AI up front, helping with the telephonic intake components. And then you're using Extracto. It's a tool we have here at EXL, where we're leveraging, basically extracting the content from the faxes or from medical records to help with case setup and downstream clinical decision making. And with this type of application of digital assets, it's all about making sure we've got the licensed staff working at the top of their license. Another example is our health risk assessment capability, where we've basically designed this end-to-end solution that's scalable for the enrollment process for MA members. And it's a great member experience because it's simplified enrollment. But on the back end, you're able to store the data and leverage that in a push or pull fashion to help with quality care coordination or care case management activities.
Great. Thank you so much, Sherry. Ergon, would you have anything to add to that?
Absolutely. First of all, I think Sherry made some great points. Adding to that, I would focus it back a bit on the conversational AI aspect of it and the impact that we've seen it have in member and provider satisfaction. Key is this, what we found. When you're providing services to a member or provider as a call center provider, let's say, when the provider calls the call center to submit a claim on behalf of a patient, they don't follow a script. The call center agent has a script. They're trying to follow a script and figure out exactly what they're supposed to do within specific bounds. They have a workflow. If you try to put a rules-based engine, an IVR, in their place, it doesn't work because they're not able to handle that provider and what they need, and providers are a difficult audience to please. We found as you install a conversational AI instead that understands the human variance that a provider may have, be able to follow them as they change topics, as they change context, as they go through a complex dialogue. The AI being able to actually help them solve problems is materially valuable. If you expand that further, what does it translate to in terms of results? We actually had experience with one of our customers recently during COVID. They do insurance claims processing for dental. They had a call center in El Salvador. In March of last year, that call center in El Salvador went down completely. Everybody went home, and they could not provide services anymore. They had to put a conversational AI up quickly, rapidly, to assist in handling customer calls. The most interesting thing was customer satisfaction and provider satisfaction, which is the primary caller, went up when a conversational AI was deployed. That's surprising. Why? In simple terms, why? The conversational AI was able to answer every call within 5 seconds and solve every incoming contact within a minute. No hold, no variance, no inconsistencies. So as we find solutions that can handle the unexpected from a human being, you can then take advantage of the efficiencies that technology brings to drive much better customer satisfaction on the provider and member space.
Thank you, Ergun. Joe, before we go to the next question, anything else you'd like to add to this important topic of how do you infuse digital into workflow?
Yeah, I think the important thing there is we're seeing even bigger gains from a TriWest perspective in operations as even opposed to product gains. So we've implemented a lot of in our scheduling area, a lot of NLP and RPA related technologies to really streamline our efficiency, save thousands of hours of labor costs, and bring the information right into our EXL Health medical management system. So we're also looking at how we can make more efficient some of our provider scheduling integrations with entities like ZocDoc and others from a provider perspective.
Thank you, Joe. I'm a big proponent of learning from others. And so I'm curious, I'm going to direct this question to Ankur and Ergun. And Ankur, you can go first. But what do you think the healthcare industry can learn by looking at what other industries are doing with digital to impact, I'll call it the end user's experience, in our case, member and provider?
So I actually wanted to look at this question so less from the point of view of the customer, but actually from the point of view of the decision maker. There's a reason why digital transformation accelerated during COVID. It was because it was an existential issue because business cases did not need to be put together. And I think there's a key insight over there. Over 80% of such digital solution engagements actually fail. And the reason they fail is because the business cases and the organizational emphasis starts to die down. And I'm going to connect it to something Sherry said. What we've seen across the board, and this is true in healthcare as well as in other industries, when a digital business case is made purely on cost reduction, typically it doesn't make the cut, or on the other hand, you end up compromising on the functionality you could bring to the table. On the other hand, when you're able to weaponize the digital transformation and use it to change the customer experience so that you can get revenue, you're actually able to be more expansive. And there are a couple of very interesting examples over here. The biggest transformation in the financial services industry took place after the financial crisis in 2008. It was because the existing banks stopped lending, and you had these digital startups that came and created a new consumer experience and started taking over lending to small businesses. I think we're going to start seeing similar things in healthcare where the progressive players and providers are actually going to use digital to win market share while creating more margin in operations.
Thank you so much, Ankur.
So I'll chime in. Ankur makes excellent points. I think when we look at it, how you drive lessons learned in the healthcare industry. One is, as I said before, across industries we've seen a need for transformation. Healthcare has felt it more than anybody else. We've learned candidly from our knowledge of what AI can do in these other industries. Really, the capabilities of AI in healthcare are not throttled by the industry. There are many applications from scheduling, from payment management, from insurance claims processing, prescription drug information, patient management. There are extensive use cases that mimic or model things that we've done in other industries, and we've seen them. There are also a lot of things you can take advantage of what have been done in other regulated industries, so they can deploy solutions that protect the data, give the customer a compliance and regulated environment that they need. The only real challenge is the cultural one. I think we'll get to that. But you really need to think about how do you drive this type of change given the stakeholders in the business. I don't think you're going to have limitations on what the industry itself requires.
Great, thank you so much. All right, we'll move on to the next topic. I think we had some excellent insights from you all as we head into the last topic of operational and quality outcomes. Automation and digital technologies present enormous opportunities to deliver more efficient, efficacious, and cost-effective healthcare while addressing member needs. Operational improvements are needed to support increased demand in membership enrollment for things like Medicare Advantage plans, which we're seeing with Medicare supplement benefits, which are 3 times increased in 2021. However, these opportunities and benefits can come with concerns around security and privacy of patient data, AI bias, as well as challenges related to lack of awareness of the benefits AI may deliver to end users. Encore, I'm curious for you, what do you see as the greatest challenges for adopting and operationalizing digital solutions, and any suggestions to overcome these challenges?
So, seemingly, the typical problems, Sue, are the data is disaggregated, it's not well organized, it's dirty. Seemingly, another problem is that there's a lot of legacy technology that's in the works, so it's hard to bring new solutions and really put it like a bandage over what one has existing. I say seemingly, and I use the word a little cynically, because while these problems existed earlier, what's happening with some of the new technology is it's very customer facing. So a simple example, when you receive claims information from a customer, you actually can build an AI solution where the customer's documents directly come to that solution and the AI just pumps clean data. That's it. To demystify the AI, it's really taking in customer input and providing clean data that can then power whatever legacy system that existed. So I think data, clean data, as well as legacy technology tend to be the issues. We've seen that some of the newer solutions can actually counter that most effectively. One last thought, which we're seeing again in healthcare as well as across other organizations, a lot of healthcare companies have added actually a new CXO level to their leadership team, a customer experience officer. And while this particular role is focused on quality, safety, and experience, the experience outside on digital real estate, as well as when it is not just a clinical experience, is becoming as important. And we see that as one way of actually achieving success, where you're able to separate out changing the customer experience from actually having to work with a lot of the legacy data and technology. And we are seeing that very easy to do, even with some of the conversational AI solutions that Ergun was talking about. They don't need old technology or old data. They can be largely independent, and the integration is pretty frictionless.
Great, thank you, Encore. We're actually going to take the opportunity to hear from each of our panelists on this one. So I'm going to go to Sherry next. Any thoughts for you, Sherry?
Yeah, so I looked at it from a little bit different perspective, and I see the greatest challenge is an operational one around HIPAA and privacy. You know, as we all work in the healthcare space, we know there's significant risks to any organization that fails to comply, and those are fees and civil actions and criminal actions. But even more than that, it's the erosion of the trust when you have something happen. It's erosion of trust from your patients and your members. And that is obviously the hardest thing to overcome once you've lost that. And, you know, these things that we're touching and automating, and conversational AI is another example. These are complex data-led processes that will almost always include some form or fashion of PHI. And so it's really critical to me that the organizations embark on understanding and doing an accurate and thorough assessment of the risks and the vulnerabilities as it relates to, you know, confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of this electronic PHI. It's also make sure that you're doing a full assessment on all your technologies, and don't forget about, you know, the other tablets, DVDs, USB drives, wearable devices, smart cards, even bring your own device type, things if you have that in your space. It's really imperative that when you're designing kind of your digital solution, that you're taking HIPAA and all of those requirements as a part of your design. And it can be accomplished through the tech design elements, how you're designing the environment, but it also can be process controls. And in some instances I've seen where we've dissected the process to make sure that along every step of the way, we're only using the minimum necessary information, or asking the hard questions of, do we even need that data element to drive the process? So it's important to kind of do that overall design as it relates to HIPAA. Then it's a whole nother piece once you've got it up and running and you need to do process design changes. Again, going back to making sure that the changes are going to not only work within the technology, but you're staying aligned to HIPAA as well.
Thank you, Sherry. Those are all very relevant points. As we look to improve efficiency and efficacy and quality, we definitely need to keep our North Star of protecting patient health information. Joe, any other additional thoughts you'd like to add at this time?
I think Sherry covered a lot of them, but as I look through, I've seen numerous studies. One I recall is MIT Sloan study, top 10 challenges. I'm going to highlight three others. One is culture, and some of these are not technology driven. Culture, so organization needs to trust the adoption of some of these digital solutions and practices. So that's a big one. I'm seeing across organizations digital expertise. Many organizations need a leader and leadership to be able to, have the vision, strategy, and put together the execution transition to be able to, adopt these operational solutions. And then the third one I highlighted earlier is some of the industry standardization. When I talk about things like EHR, electronic health records, the interoperability from a collaborative workflow standpoint, and then the data silos, how to engage those, especially with, as Sherry mentioned, the PHI data and related endpoint security for the physical devices. So there's a lot of things to come into play there, but not insurmountable. We can do it.
Yes, thank you, Joe. I think those are all excellent points, and I think with any great change, there definitely has to be that culture support as well as that talent support as well to move the needle on new initiatives, especially something as like digital, where you may not always be able to touch and feel it, because they're in algorithms behind the scenes. So definitely need to have people that can articulate that expertise and link it to others within the organization. Okay, well, we've covered an extensive amount of insight and information today. Before we close, I think it's really important that our expert panelists impart their thoughts on what is the most important takeaway from today's conversation for them. Joe, I'll keep you on the hot seat at this time and ask you for your one most important thing that you'd like people to take away.
So a key takeaway, we've talked a lot about technologies that are coming from a trend perspective. I would say don't use technology for technology's sake. Always start with solving a problem for the members or providers, and then turn that in and then work with available solutions to be able to solve that problem. But keep that in mind. Don't use technology for technology's sake. Solve a problem.
Great, thank you. Ergan, your thoughts on your one last key critical takeaway?
And actually, I will reemphasize a point Joe made very well. I've been a technologist in artificial intelligence for 20 years. It's a topic I am passionate about. I live it. And despite being a technologist, I will tell you that the level of impact AI has in an organization, the level of adoption it's able to drive, the pace at which it moves, will have almost nothing to do with technology. It will be almost entirely about organizational change management, about organizational culture, about top-down mandate. Is there an alignment as is the key objective? Because it is disruptive. Unless an organization decides to make it a part of their lifeblood, unless, like we've had in the last year, there are events that drive change, you can take the best technology solution, and if you don't have the right solution, if you're not trying to drive the right business problem, and if you don't have the right alignment organizationally, it will not deliver results. So don't focus on technology. Focus on the business, and not only technology to help to solve that problem.
I think it's a very valid point, Ergan. We talk about in EXL Health about customers don't come to us to buy digital solutions. They come to us to solve a problem. And that's really what we need to focus on, is what is the pain point and what affects that, whether it's, people, process, or technology. To Joe's point, it's not always technology. Last but not least, Sherry, any final thoughts from you in terms of what you'd like people to take away?
Yeah, it's, as you guys were going through that, I was looking back in my career, and I can remember many times where I thought, gosh, I'm surprised I have to hire people in order to do this. Why can't we just, leverage the technology? We could do it faster, smarter, probably too. And I think the year, you've heard it mentioned, the year of COVID has propelled the healthcare industry to start thinking differently about how we can solve our problems. And looking back through my career, I'm excited that this day is here and that we're able to be thinking differently and have the courage to leverage these different technologies that other industries have been doing for decades. And I feel like we're on the cutting edge of some of this in healthcare, and it's exciting for everyone to be thinking in this way.
Great. Thank you, Sherry. Well, that actually concludes our discussion in terms of prepared materials. Certainly, if there's any questions and answers, please do put those in the chat box. I actually will take a moment right now just to look and see if we've had any. Maybe this one, and certainly it's open to any panelist. What digital applications are not a fit for healthcare from your perspective? Anyone want to take a stab at that?
I'll give you my immediate reaction. I have a hard time thinking of any.
So all a fit, just have to try and figure out how exactly to fit it into the workflow, and
That's right.
how, yeah, okay.
It goes back to the question we were talking about before. Do not just try to find a solution, a problem for a technology, but it goes the same way. It's also not about what the technology fits. What is the need? What is the business demand? What is the problem that you have? Now, how can you apply technology to solve them? I don't know of any technologies offhand that you would see a digital workforce that could not apply to healthcare, as long as it was with the right initiative and driven for the right business case.
Very
Maybe
good.
the point I'd add, Sue, as I think about Ergan's point, social media might be one area of digital solutions that might have slightly harder application in healthcare.
Very good. Anyone else want to add a point there before I go to another question?
Yeah, I think even so, solutions are high-end, low-tech in a lot of cases. So we combine a lot of whether it's conversational AI or other solutions can be combined with other low-tech solutions, typically, to provide the overall solution. So keep that in mind. I agree with Ergan's comment that there's really none that I would eliminate.
Great. Thank you, Joe. Let's see. There's a question about how do you see healthcare policies potentially affecting digital solutions and the nature of how to apply those in the healthcare business? Anything out there from a regulatory standpoint that's concerning, or do you think it's things that we can work through?
So I can give my initial perspective of the ones, I think I think the intent and purpose behind the healthcare policy is only to make our industry stronger. Others may have a different perspective on that. But I feel like all of it is in order to protect, it's all centered around protecting the data, as a whole. And so I feel like, while some may be perceived as a barrier, I think I look at it from a different perspective, us making the industry stronger.
Great, thanks, Sherry. Any other comments from any of the panelists?
Yeah, if I was going to chime in quickly, I think actually regulated industries benefit from digital solutions because they remove human variance, right? The unexpected. They instill consistency. Now, that is a very effective role of technology. What you do have to be aware of is with AI solutions is you have to not have black box AI solutions that do things that you don't expect. Healthcare policies, you have to have an audit trail. Why did you give that recommendation? Why did you perform that action? How did it come to that? Are you performing what the patient actually asked you to do? For that reason, it's very important to think about supervised learning solutions, not unsupervised learning. When it comes to AI, supervised learning solutions give you an audit trail with a subject matter expert guiding the AI in doing the right thing. And then as long as you're layering supervised learning on top, now you can have very effective solutions in the regular industry. And our experience has been always in the regular industries, and we think it is critical. Combining supervised solutions with AI will give you the outcome you need.
Great. Thank you, Ergun. Okay, let me see. We have one more question. And to some degree, I think we addressed this. The question is, have you seen internal adoption issues around digital applications, meaning within an organization, and how do you combat them? We did talk previously very much about the need for culture alignment as well as talent. Is there anything else that you can think of that needs to be thought of? What are some likely objections that would come up and how to handle them?
Sue, I can take a stab at that. I think organizational change management, as Ergun mentioned earlier, is some of the major barriers. What we do is we look at different elements of change. So it could be the case for change. It could be trust. We've talked about trust within the organization. It could be resources. It could be skills. And then it could be an action plan. So you have to look at the different elements of the organizational change. There may be barriers at certain points in the implementation that you have to address. So it could be education. It could be a lot of different things. But you have to keep in mind as you go down this journey, you are going to have some challenges and some barriers that you're going to have to address organizationally.
Great, thank you, Joe. So we've heard culture, change management, talent. Anything else that anyone would like to add to that question?
I think I'll add a thought to, and the last time I spoke, I think there was a lot of echo. This feels a little better. I think in addition to culture, choosing the right first use case ends up being very important. The organization's got a lot of momentum behind digital new technologies. They want to change. And what can fatigue and exhaust it very quickly is trying to climb Everest on the first day of your workout, right? You want to choose the correct hill to climb first, build up your understanding of digital, build the organizational sort of willpower, and then solve more complex use cases. So I think that roadmap is very, very critical, and the roadmap that moves from quick wins to more complex ones so that your capabilities keep up is very important.
I really like that Encore, finding ways to break it down into bite-sized consumable pieces, finding a way to get started versus being in this phase of kind of analysis paralysis as to what the impact will be or what you should choose, but just really pushing that button to find a way to take baby steps, walking and then running, or eventually, as you say, climbing Mount Everest. So thank you. Let's see. I think that is it for all of our questions at this time. I want to thank the speakers for your valuable insights today. I would really welcome others. Certainly, I think we had our email addresses up there. So certainly, if people want to reach out on LinkedIn, you know where to find us to ask any questions that you may have. So thank you so much for your time today. This concludes our session, and you are welcome to disconnect. Thank you.
You.
Thank you again for that great presentation and for sharing your thoughts. And thank you to the audience for your participation in today's webinar. This concludes today's presentation. Thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day.